Well, with that in mind, let's dive right in and open things up for questions. Who would like to begin? All right, Pablo, I saw your hand come up first. Why don't you kick us off?
Thanks, man. Good to see you, John. Thanks for hosting this. Hey, Kevin. Man, I think I have the obvious question that I assume everybody's walking in here with, and it's this idea that when you're going to write a book as a way to launch a category, right? Like you've done it so many times. Is there a particular structure that you think of? Is there like a nuanced approach, kind of framework that makes it work as a launch of a category, and how do you go about doing that apart from being a brilliant writer?
Pablo, first of all, I guess I should want to say that writing a book to claim thought leadership in a category or a new category you're trying to create is a great tactic. It really does put a stake in the ground in a category. The challenge with writing a book is that it takes a long time to do. To write a good book is going to take you 12 to 18 months, and then if you're getting published by a major publisher, they're going to publish it 6 months or a year later, and that might be too late. One of the ways around that is what I've seen some people do, which is to essentially start writing blog posts or posts on Medium or something like that start to add up to a book. So you're starting to claim those thought leadership pieces piece by piece, knowing that eventually you're going to try to package them all together in a book. I don't think there's a particular formula. The one time, Play Bigger essentially was a book about category design that was designed to create the category of category design. And I think the only other time I've really done that kind of work was I've had a long relationship with General Catalyst, the big VC firm, and doing collaborative books with Hemant Taneja, who runs it. And we put out a book, 18 months ago called Healthcare, which was trying to establish the idea of a new health assurance category. And the book was extremely effective. I mean, it really started to catalyze a lot of companies to rally around this idea, and it helped one of Hemant's companies called Commure to claim the space as the leader, the one that's kind of leading the industry into that space. So it's a really effective thing to do. There's no real formula for doing it. The main thing is to write a thought leadership book that stakes out what this category should be like. Does that help, Pablo?
Yeah, it's fair, man. I don't know if I don't know if there was like a way that you approach it in some kind of logical fashion of like devote X to the evangelizing the POV, have this much data kind of thing, right? Like, I don't know if there was some kind of framework, but I totally understand that it's just like, just write a freaking awesome book about the importance of this thing and make it really smart. And I do see the blog, like direct to creator format, I think is really brilliant too, man. So it's great that you brought that up.
Yeah, honestly, Paulo, there is no formula for doing that. And if you look at a dozen different books, they all are put together in a dozen different ways. And
have you ever thought about doing it kind of like how John did it at BombBomb, where like the idea of like interviewing a bunch of people in order to kind of like crowdsource the knowledge and then weaving it together? Have you ever seen that kind of work in other ways?
I haven't been a part of anything like that, but anything is illegitimate as long as it actually essentially lays down the law of what this category is going to be, right? And establishes yourself as a one who knows how it's going to be.
Cool, thanks, man.
Kevin, and I think what you said about the timeline required to write and then publish a book and get it out there, it kind of speaks to how category design is really a long-term play, right? Like if you're thinking about category design in the context of something that's going to come and go in 6 months, that's not really the lens that we're using for this strategy. If you're going to write a book, you need to be thinking about things, trends, and opportunities that can last, multiple years.
Well, exactly, John. As we tell everybody, is that category design is a years-long process, and it's about winning the category over time, not just putting a stake in the ground and saying we won, we're first to market, we won. It doesn't work that way.
Right. Well, thanks for taking that question. Thanks for the thoughtful question, Pablo. Pete, I believe you are next.
Hello, Pete.
Hello, how are you doing, Kevin?
Pete knows what this is about intimately. He's been gone through the ringer before.
A couple of times.
Side. Yeah.
Thanks very much for both of you doing this. My question really is around timing. Companies, as they're getting started, need to understand category thinking, but then they need to start going through the gauntlet themselves, so that especially young companies pivot so frequently and may very well end up in different categories, really substantially different categories, not just, wow, we're going to phrase the POV this way or that way. It's like very different strategies. So my question is around timing. What's the earliest that you would engage somebody to do a category design exercise? What's optimal for engaging there? What are the benefits of starting beforehand? The category design consulting activity, right, of getting somebody to really be able to specify what their problem is, who their customer is, what's their different, what's the plutonium, all that sort of stuff. That can be helpful before they're actually even ready to write a POV, because it might shift. Anyway, that was kind of a long summary of the question. Will you talk about timing that you've seen in your experience? Thanks.
We have worked with companies at every stage you could think of, and the value is different at different stages, which is what I think you're saying, John, or you have to treat it differently at different stages. We just I don't know, what was it, 3 or 4 months ago, 6 months ago, something like that range. We did a project for a young company, very young company, pre-Series A, and we had a total of like 6 employees, I think, in the company, and it was extremely valuable for them because it really helped them kind of organize their thoughts about what they really want to be, how to put it, how to approach investors, what kind of investors to approach, what kind of people to start hiring at that early stage. But they also, it's also, you have to preface all of that with, you may get 2 years down the line with this and discover you're going in a completely different direction, and we have to revisit this whole thing. But it can be really valuable at that stage of getting things over the, over the first hump. Ideally, the most successful projects we've probably done have been with companies that have been somewhere after Series A or Series B, where they've been around 3 or 4 years, have a product they started with, have had some success with it, and get to a point where they want the success to add up to something bigger, and want to really establish themselves as a leader in a particular market. And then by that point, things are solidified enough that they really know what they're about. But Pete, I think that's kind of where we were when we worked with you guys at that particular time. It just needed something to catalyze, like, what's the next thing? Where do you take this? What's the big idea? Usually by that point, 3 or 4 years down the line, you put together a leadership team of 6 or 8 or 10 people around the table, and they've got 6 or 8 or 10 different opinions about where things need to go. And one of the beauties of this process is actually getting everybody to align around one, eventually, by the time we're done with this. So that's really valuable at that stage. We have also worked with companies that are 10, 20, one company that was 60 years old, and they were repositioning themselves, or saw a bigger opportunity, or felt like they were getting lost amid a landscape of competition. And we, this exercise, this category design thinking and process, can really help at that stage too. So I don't think there's a right answer about what time in a company's life to do this. The right answer is knowing what you're using it for at that particular time.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Pete.
Yeah, thank you, Pete. Really interesting question. Michael Kelly, you're up next.
Thank you. Appreciate your time, Kevin. Hopefully a pretty simple question. Do you have kind of a framework to work through when thinking about naming a new category?
Yeah, interesting question, because we have always found that the actual name of the category is one of the hardest things to get to and get consensus with a team around. And it's also, we've come to feel less important than the POV itself. The story, the POV, the POV really is the story you tell yourselves as a company. And it establishes like a sense of who you are, where you're going, what you're doing. And that one little name could be any of a dozen things, and that POV and that story would still be the same. So, we've arrived at that category name in a bunch of different ways. And sometimes it's just us listening to the whole process of what's going on, and we're writing the POV, and just out of writing the POV, an idea for a category name pops up. We'll put it in the draft of the POV and present it back to the company in another meeting, and bat it around. And sometimes in the context of the POV, the company sees it and says, well, I wouldn't pick that category, but actually in context it actually works. I would say a lot of times, and there's a whole lot of times when we get to the end of the POV, the company loves the whole POV and hates the category name. And then that just leads to a whole discussion. Mike, who is, I think is on, Mike, are you here? He is.
I'm here, I'm hiding.
Hey, Mike.
I was about to say, I saw you a few minutes ago.
So Mike has sometimes run this play. I mean, tell him about the, just doing the word game. I mean, that sometimes has actually been useful in getting to that category name.
Yeah, we end up, everyone gets hung up on the category name. And in fact, I do all these office hour discussions, do 4 a week as a gift back to the community. And they always start with the category name and what they're proud of and challenged with. And in the end, we find it to be the last thing we worry about and the least important, but it's important when you're done. And so when we're struggling, we do this thing that you guys could try yourselves. We have everybody list 5 words, not phrases, but words that make sense to them related to the point of view, and always get the point of view done first. And then we take the 5 words and we rank them, and we create this big text file. If somebody gives it a 5 out of 10, we list it 5 times. If somebody gives it a 9, we list it 9 times. And then we throw it into a word cloud, and everybody just stares at it and realizes that simplicity is usually the right answer. So it's just an exercise we do to try to break the ice.
I love it. Appreciate it.
Hey, I'm actually going to call on Mike again to continue with that answer. The other thing you've often told companies that I think ends up being true is to pay attention to how, once you throw the category name out there, how others start using it and shifting depending on what you're seeing. Because, I mean, I'll let you say it, but basically because the category name is really something for the world, it's not something for the company.
Yeah.
And,
I mean, we usually say it's utilitarian. It's a gift to the world, and it's just a starting block. If after the category name is out and analysts or customers or even competitors start shifting the name a bit, as long as you're still the one leading the pack and your point of view is what they're associating with that category name, by all means, let it shift. I mean, especially an analyst. If you can get an analyst to change one word and then put you in the upper right quadrant, that's your category name. Don't even debate it.
So be open to your name changing, but be much more committed to the POV itself.
Yep.
Absolutely.
that's
The POV is the genetics of your DNA of the category.
All right, Michael, thanks for that question. Joe, what do you have for us?
Yeah, thank you, John, and apologize for the music. I'm in a coffee shop today. We actually just recently finished our category design process and launched a new site and everything. So this is a very timely discussion for us. Well, I think it's very easy to focus on the name. Ironically enough, I wrote that down before that last question. What I really want to talk about is the problem. So a part of our point of view, we actually did name the problem that we solve. And I was wondering, I kind of had a two-part question on the problem. Have you any advice or thoughts on creating original research around the problem that you've named as a way to kind of like justify it? Because I think, you know, from the point of view process, we solidified around that problem just based out of industry experience, right? But I think when you get further down funnel, there becomes this desire to really, you know, justify and validate the problem that it is this indeed this thing. Because without the problem, you know, it's so, you know what I mean? Like you talk about the solution, the new category name is like, whoa, what's the thing that justifies this, that makes the, okay. And the second part of that, outside of the original research, would be we're in the healthcare industry. And so in the unhealthcare book that you wrote, Damp, thanks for the recommendation there. It was great. It can be kind of like high school. Everybody knows each other. They've all kissed each other, right? And vendors saying things, maybe a little bit less trust than, you know, MarTech, where it's marketers marketing to marketers. So I'm curious, how do you talk about a problem in a way that is not preachy or maybe like talking down or lacking empathy? Yeah, that's kind of my two-part, just really an exploration around problem as relates to category design. Thanks, Kevin.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Joe. Well, so it's really interesting you brought up the first question, because we're in the middle of it right now with probably one of the largest organizations we've done this kind of work with. And you know, they have like 1,000 salespeople. And so we did the whole category design work, wrote the POV, and then the next, you know, we're kind of rolling that out to the sales force now, and they are calling for exactly that. You know, the problem statement came out of industry experience, the people around the table, what everybody kind of knew was happening, but not original research. We weren't like sending out a team of people to gather a bunch of facts and figures and prove all of this stuff. But now we're doing it on the back end, because exactly what you said is like the sales team that's got to go out there are saying, okay, you made all these statements in the problem side of this. Help us with some stuff to back it up, some real stats to back it up. So I think that's actually it's really a good process to do at the back end of doing a POV. I think it would get in the way if you try to do that up front, because you don't really know what you're researching yet when you're sitting around that conference room table and trying to brainstorm what the real problem is you're solving. But on the back end, it makes a ton of sense. So to your other question about, I think about being preachy or talking down about the problem. I don't know. I've never felt that to be much of an issue. I mean, as long as you're stating the problem as people experience it, you're not telling them. I mean, you don't never want to be telling them you're doing something wrong. You want to be stating what's wrong with this particular industry or this particular problem. And describing it in just very matter-of-fact terms. Not there shouldn't be any like any preachiness, any you're wrong, you're screwing up kind of thing to it. It should be, this is a problem caused by these various factors, and it leads to these various, you know, outcomes that are not good, and the world needs this problem solved. I mean, that's kind of just the way you should be laying it out.
Joe, I've always, go ahead, Joe.
Oh, was I say, does that help, Joe?
Yes, thank you.
I was going to ask you, Joe, I've always found it helps to like hear as much kind of real world category design work going on as possible. If you can't share what you're working on, it's okay, I understand. But since you did mention you had kind of worked on the POV, are you open to sharing at least kind of the rough sketch version of that with us?
Yeah, it's kind of incredible to see just how much a forcing function will make you sit down and get out of the ether and theory of category design and all the fun kind of mental thinking around it. to do a webinar. So we got a webinar coming up, kind of with an industry partner, so to speak. And well, we've got a slide deck that has a narrative, and we don't want to walk in there with just opinions, however informed they might be. And so one of our team members, is essentially getting statistics from various studies that kind of back up this narrative of this problem that we've named in tandem with the new category name, right? So that's the real experience that we're in. And in my mind, I'm playing around with, well, might we go out there and do some kind of poll to, I mentioned we're in healthcare, to patients, right? And frame the problems that we might ask in a way that is, you don't want to like, and that's kind of where the sticking point is, right? Because you don't want to lead the witness, so to speak. You want to actually have research that has value outside of the point of view, because it should be a problem whether you exist or not. That's kind of like an Andy Raskin way of talking about, right? And so that's kind of where we're at. It's like, how do you create research that has value outside of how you apply it to your company narrative and point of view? Because the category does deserve to exist regardless of whether or not you do, right? And as Damp just said, like, it's your job to surf it and stay on the leading edge of it. So that's kind of where it comes from. Thanks, John.
Yeah. Oh, and I just want to bring one other thing up. You did mention about naming the problem, which I 100% back. I mean, we talk about naming the villain, like, in a Batman movie, you want to have the Joker, or a villain you can put a name and a face to. So the more you can, that helps make it tangible. And then you can actually, and we've had many different clients who then start referring to using that as a shorthand for the problem, which is brilliant. So then you start, talking about this thing that exists out there, as it has, has a name, and it unlocks the whole idea of what that problem is.
Yeah, so naming the villain can be just as much, if not more powerful than naming the category itself. Yeah, it's a good point. And yeah, Joe, thanks for walking us through that. I think what you said, it's a good reminder of like category design. It's not about your solution in search of a problem. What you said about the problem existing, whether your company or your business does, I think that's a really succinct and appropriate way to put it, because you are trying to solve problems that exist, not trying to, like I said, go out in search of problems because you happen to have built something. So thank you for that.
John, the flip side to that too is if you've really done a really good job, really thinking this through as category designers, then you're going to end up describing a solution that should exist irrespective of the company.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because if you're describing the problem that exists irrespective of the company, and the solution that the world needs irrespective of the company, then you've actually given the company the benefit of knowing exactly what kind of solution to provide. Because if you're using the solution side to just justify what the company already does, you're not really doing a great job with category design.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think that perspective helps you kind of get your head out of the weeds, above the clouds, so you can look more objectively at what that solution and what that product roadmap should look like.
Yep.
Yeah. All right, John, you're up next.
Hi, guys.
Hi, John.
Cheers, John, and thanks for taking the question. It's just two general questions, actually, really. The first question is, since you've written the book, has there been any kind of headwinds, insights, or general kind of opinions or anything about it that you can share, something that may have changed, or anything at all that really, that since you wrote the book, you look back at it now and think, well, this has changed since then, or this insight, or whatever it might be. So that's the first question. And the second question is, what works to gain initial traction with potential clients when presenting them with category design? Because generally it's a very, very new word or a new concept to a lot of people.
Sure. Okay. I'm gonna answer the first one. I'm gonna punt the second one over to Mike, because he's the one who takes all of the sales calls, and he's gonna know the answer to that much better than I do. So on the first question so the book is now 6 years old, and just by doing this and working through this year after year with company after company, we've learned a lot of new concepts to bring into the discussion that weren't even in the book. And, you know, I mean, that would take a long conversation to kind of get into what some of those are. I would say what are the things that are in the book that, one of the things that's in the book that bugs me more now than it did then was the concept of like every company should and has to do this lightning strike where you know, it's, and that's the only way to do this is concentrate all your resources on one giant, you know, go to market thing. I mean, that's very effective, but that's also not the only way to do this. It's become clear. And, you know, having a big, powerful rollout is great, but you know, if that's all you do, that's not enough. And it's also fine is some companies have been very effective at sort of more of a, as we've come to call, a rolling thunder rather than a, you know, than a single lightning strike. And if there's a concept in the book that didn't get the weight that it deserves, that I've come to think more about lately is the concept of the Gorosky curve. In that book by Paul Gorosky, The Evolution of New Markets, I think is something every entrepreneur or, you know, a CEO or CMO should read, because there's a lot deeper insights into there about how categories evolve and why you have to work at being the dominant player of a category over many years and through many different cycles. So I would encourage everybody to dig in deeper on that concept. But I'm going to throw the second part over to Mike.
Thanks, Kevin.
Yeah, but before I answer that, one of the other things I think it's not really a misconception from the book, but I think it was implied more so than intentional, is that this is heavily marketing related. You know, more CMOs call me than CEOs, but the reality is marketing is just one piece of the pie, right? It is the busiest piece once you start rolling a category out, but you know, we've got people that give the POV to job candidates, to product marketers, to, you know, engineers. And that to me should be more forefront than it has been. John, could you repeat the second part of the question? Because I want to make sure I nail it.
Yeah, sure. Just like what works to gain initial traction with potential clients. So, you know, when you're just bringing them in at the start, and how would you get them interested in category design? Do they come to you out of the blue, or is it through lots of marketing? And then, you know, what do you do at the initial, you know, do you do a workshop with them at the start to get them interested, or what works well?
So clients coming to us to do work with them is what you're asking?
Yeah, exactly. Just as you would do it, yeah.
It would be, I've got the numbers, but basically we probably do one project out of 20 conversations. Out of the 20 conversations, 15 of them are, I read the book and I want to talk to you. Of the other 5, it's probably 3 you were recommended to me by, you know, Joe Blow, usually a friend who's a CEO or a VC or an investor. And then the last 2 are usually alumni, people that come back. For instance, Pete Chargan, who's on the call, he's an alumni. He has worked with us on the client side. But I would say the book pushes more than anything. I told an investor once, he said, can you send us a proposal? And I said, no, buy the book. It's 280 pages of a proposal. I already gave you the price, read the book. Kevin was a little disturbed because I kind of threw it out in a rude way, but you know, the guy deserved it.
Yeah, no, I actually have about 20 of them in the office, and that's what I send them out. It works really well.
Mike, of that 1 out of 20 that ends up working with you, what can you tell us about what's different about them? What have they done, or how are they thinking differently from the others who are not qualified or not a good fit?
Usually there's a heavy, we think like investors, right? Kevin and I and Dan, our partner in Europe, we're not consultants that work for cash the way most people think. We always get involved with equity. So we think a little bit more like investors. So think about a VC, right? They talk to 20 companies, they probably don't invest in 1 out of 20. It's probably 1 out of 40. That's kind of the way we operate. So, you know, somebody reaches out, wants to discuss their category issues. You know, on our website, we have these office hours. It's literally, you get a free half hour to talk about whatever you want. During that period, I'll get a good feel, you know, of the company, the problem they're solving in the category, almost to the point occasionally where I want to just blurt out the answer. And yet then I ask myself, would I invest in this company? And that's usually the key differentiator. The CEO has to be behind it, and we need to feel that our time and money is worth getting involved. You know, if all I hear is we're Coke fighting Pepsi or vice versa, then we're not interested. If we hear, hey, I created this new category called kombucha, and we're going to be on the shelf next to Coke and Pepsi, that's interesting.
So a big factor for you, it's almost like you deciding more than just as much as it is what they're doing, but you're looking for companies that understand the category design ethos and are trying to kind of, it's like superimpose a strategy that's not really a fit for what they're trying to build.
Yeah. So the most common thread is they're solving a problem that people didn't know they had, or they're solving a problem with a solution that no one knew existed. And when I hear that, that's usually the litmus test of, okay, they got a category. Second thing is the CEO has to truly believe in it. If it's a CMO that reaches out, the end of the conversation is get a copy of Play Bigger into your CEO's hands and then call me back. It really turns into, you know, in the end, we need to believe that the work we're going to do is going to be successfully implemented over the next 2 years, 3 years. I mean, it takes time to build a category. And if people use words like messaging and positioning, agency, you know, that too much marketing, that's when we lose interest, because this is nothing. In the beginning, category design has nothing to do with marketing. Marketing is done after the fact. And so if it's too biased from a marketing perspective, sometimes the project doesn't work. In fact, the biggest failures we've seen are because sales does not get behind the work. You know, a salesperson, they wake up in the morning and they take the shortest route to a commission check. And if that shortest route means ignore the category design work we just rolled out, it's going to fail.
All right. Thanks for adding that additional context. That was really, really helpful. Dean, what do you have for Kevin?
Hi, thanks guys. Thanks for your work. John,
Hey,
thanks
Dave.
for bringing this on. It's the first time I've joined one of these. I guess my question is, I'm an entrepreneur. I've built and exited a couple of companies, and this last one was truly inspired by the book to kind of take a very different approach to how we built the product and how we created the brand. Caveat, we're in the cannabis industry, which is full of all kinds of challenges in and of itself. So that's a big factor in the circumstances we're navigating. But I'd say like the two biggest challenges I've had with implementing category design, the first one is, how long is this going to take? I think everyone's kind of brought that up on this call. It's just, you don't know. And what would be helpful is not only do you not know, I think you're always kind of wondering, are you right or are you wrong? Are you going in the right direction? Are you not going in the right direction? And I have a friend who has a biotech company, and I was really impressed by his ability to talk to his investors and board and show them progress. Had nothing to do with revenue, had nothing to do with sales. It just had to do with progress. It was very scientific. You know, at this point we did this, now we've achieved this, now we've achieved this. And it got everyone on the same page. Oh, okay, we all know where we're going. We're going in the same direction. Okay, we're in the middle of the ocean. We don't really know where we are, but we've got these tools to track and measure our progress. So my question to you, Kevin, is, have you guys thought about frameworks or tools that can help along the way identify and validate whether you're on the wrong or right track, or whether it's working or not? And I'll just use one quick example that I've used is, in my particular circumstance, I look at repurchase rates as a super, super important thing beyond just how many sales we have to see, are we solving people's problem? Are they coming back to buy the product over and over again? So yeah, my question is, have you guys developed tools that assist with that? Especially if you're talking about like 5 years or 7 years, so you can communicate more effectively to investors, your board, and most importantly, your team. So people kind of understand that we are succeeding, even though we may not have seen monetary results as of yet.
A quick question about your question. The person or the company that developed the sort of scientific way to, to show progress, was that about, I think you mentioned it was a biotech company?
Yeah.
So was the progress they were showing the progress in the research and towards getting to this biotech solution? They weren't, or was it scientifically showing how the market is evolving?
It had nothing to do with the market. No, it was much more about how a particular invention, and they were making progress in their research, almost like a academic thing, saying,
right,
okay, we've gotten out of this, and now when we get to this, it'll be more efficient, and then more efficient, and then more efficient, and then we will have a marketable product. So it was kind of showing a journey of
so that's
validating along the way. And in this instance, you're kind of in the middle of the ocean, wondering a lot in the dark if you're going in the right direction, looking for some signs to validate, yes. And when a customer says, finally, you solved my problem, you think, okay, that's a good sign. So are there, so back to my question, are there frameworks, or have you guys dealt with ways to measure, you're on the right track, or you might be on the right track, or you're probably, I'll take any of them, but something other than, hopefully, this is going to work out in 5 years.
right. Well, let me say a couple of things. So one is what you described is essentially a product roadmap or a product success, steps. What I don't know what you really call it, but which I actually don't think has anything to do with category design or whether a category is being successful or not, because you can follow all those steps and build this great product and show everybody that you've been going that way, and actually build a product that doesn't matter a one whit.
Nobody wants, right? Yeah.
Right. So I don't think that has actually any connection to what we all do as category designers. To be blunt about your, as one answer is no, we've never developed any kind of like tool that can like analyze a market and understand, whether or not you're going, this is actually happening. But I will point everybody back to Paul Gorosky again, and the research he did for that book, The Evolution of New Markets. Because if the central thing in that book is a very elegant chart that shows how categories evolve over time. And it's pretty intuitive, because if you can imagine that on day one of any category, there's, like the one company that's inventing this thing in the space. And if you look at his chart, it basically is a curve that starts very, a little slowly at first, but then quickly ramps up. And that curve is the number of companies in a space. So if you're really early in a category and creating a category, and counterintuitive as this may sound, if you don't see a bunch of companies piling into that space and saying, that's a good idea, I'm going after it too, you've created a category that doesn't matter. Because if it really matters, as soon as everybody else sees it, they're going to want to come in. And what Gorosky describes is they'll all come in with different versions of that thing that you're trying to create. And if, as an example, if you think about the early days of the smartphone market, when smartphones first started to arrive and come out, there was a zillion different versions of what these things would look like, and different operating systems. And some were, BlackBerry things with chiclet keys and flip phones and everything else, right? And so what Gorosky describes is that curve goes up as everybody tries all these things, throwing at this particular category. And there comes this one moment in time. And in the smartphone market, it was the day Apple introduced the iPhone. There comes this one moment in time when the dominant design appears, and everybody says that's what the category looks like. And sometimes it's a new arrival, like Apple jumping in at that last minute and creating the dominant design out of nothing. Many times, though, it's a company that's been at this for years, 4, 5, 6 years, constantly creating that dominant design over time, and winning that space at the critical moment. So the thing is, you have to look for other companies jumping into the space. You have to press your category case over 4, 5, 6 years as all those companies in to make sure that you are the dominant design at that moment in time. Because the minute that dominant design gets chosen by the buying public, the number of competitors in that space falls like a rock, because you're either on board with the dominant design or you go out of business. BlackBerry, perfect example. Or you get somehow absorbed, you copy the dominant design. Samsung's copying essentially the design that Apple created. But if you are the one that wins that dominant design at that moment, you get to reign over this category while everybody else disappears. And that's the magic moment, not the lightning strike at the beginning. That's the magic moment.
Okay, so just looking at the market and seeing how others are moving in a similar direction or not is one indicator. And then other than your solution being the right one 5 years later, are there any other things along the way that you can use with consumers or customers or, you know, whatever it may be that, for instance, validating that the problem you think you're solving is a big problem to begin with?
Sure. Well, I mean, there's pretty straightforward. I mean, certainly uptake your product, and revenue coming in, and are you is the product you've created addressing a wide audience, or is it like there are like 3 users in the world and they're sending all your revenue your way? I mean, all of those things are signals along the way. And you need to watch all of those. But one of the key ones is, is there a recognition that this is a space? Are there others coming into this? Are the analysts starting to circle around and saying, this is really interesting? So there's a lot of indicators you get along the way. Conversely, if you're sitting there and you're building this great product that you guys all think is, and the category is right, and you're building this product, and you're seeing that there's just a handful of customers that seem really interested, the rest kind of don't get it. Revenue is climbing incrementally, not really kind of having that kind of exponential effect, and nobody else seems to be coming in. You're standing there and you're all alone. I mean, those are all signs that the category is just not what it should be. Or it's still evolving. I mean, I think that's probably a possibility too, that you've seen other people come in, it's just taking time. Like there's a new player, oh, we're seeing this product now of interest. Oh, people are moving in this direction. I'm in an emerging industry where the consumer choices are changing quite frequently. So anyway, what you say, it's very helpful and makes perfect sense, but I guess what I'm just adding to it is, again, it just takes time sometimes to get that feedback. But if you're 4 or 5 years in and that competition piling isn't happening, then you need to take a hard look at what you're doing. And maybe a sign that you're way too early. But that's bad, because you're telling people about a category they're not really understanding yet, or don't have the technology, sort of the technology ecosystem doesn't quite support yet. And what's going to happen to the company is going to run out of money before the thing actually takes off. And the category may be perfectly right, and somebody else is going to pick it up 10 years later. Yeah. Look, Mark Andreessen and Ben Horowitz started Loud Cloud to create, essentially AWS 10 years before Amazon. Ran out of money, went out of business. So that's why now they're VCs. And yet, 10 years later, Jeff Bezos comes along and recognizes the opportunity and starts AWS at the right time, and boom. So, that's another thing that happens. All right, super helpful. Thank you. Appreciate it. It's a good example.
Yeah, thanks for those questions, Dean, and appreciate the thoughtfulness there, Kevin. For anyone who missed the name of the book that we've been referencing, or if you're watching the recording, it's called The Evolution of New Markets by Paul Grosky. Right. There's a link to it in the chat as well. All right, let us get about 10 minutes left. Let's move on to Chris.
Yeah, thanks, John. Hey, Kevin.
Hi, Chris.
3 or 4 years ago, we created the professional publishing category, but we're moving beyond books. So we primarily write published market books for entrepreneurs, executives, like other high-end people. The goal for the company was always to move past books and into just this broad area of media, but keep with our niche of people that have expert wisdom, expert knowledge, and then want to share that. And then by the way of leveraging media get more exposure, can have a greater impact. So my question is, what do we do with this professional publishing category if in the near future we want to create the professional media category? Do we just retire that, stop using it entirely, or is there a way that that just becomes a subcategory of sorts?
Yeah, but what's the company name?
Scribe Media.
Scribe Media? Okay. You said Scribe Media sounds very similar to a company founded by my brother called Deek Digital. So you might look and see if there's any synergies or competition there. It'd be interesting.
What's the company name?
Deek Digital.
Digital?
DEKE.
right.
Digital.
I'll look it up.
But anyway, yeah, I don't think it's a problem to move, to move the category, and expand on it. I mean, that's what should happen actually, and a lot of startups, get going and establish themselves in a particular category, but see that there is a bigger category to create, and just morph into it. I'd when that moment comes, I'd sit down and rethink it again, go through that category as design thinking again, and what does this bigger category look like, and how do we label it? And maybe the professional publishing thing sits in a nest underneath it. Certainly a viable way to do it, or maybe professional media or whatever just becomes the overarching category, and publishing and video and TikTok things and whatever else all just kind of feed into it. I don't know.
Okay.
But I don't, I have nothing against the idea. I mean, we always say, and Mike and Dan are on the call. I mean, we tell people all the time, companies all the time, that the POV is a living document. It's not something that's not Moses coming down from the mountain, with the 2 tablets that are in stone and nobody can ever alter those things. It's a living document that should change when the circumstances call for it.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, because our goal is to essentially own the word professional. So whether if it's professional publishing or professional media or professional podcasting or whatever it is we come up in the future, keep some sort of uniformity between at least part of the category. But then as we expand into the decades and decades to come, who knows what that category is going to be. But we figured if we're building it, we might as well keep it, might as well own it, and then just see where it goes.
Right.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thanks for being here, Chris. Pasha, it's good to see you again. What's your question today?
Great. Thanks for having me. So this is timely because I'm literally working on deck for a client. And I think it's a testament to how much category design has caught on, because in the last week, I've had 2 clients speak to us about it. Within that, in doing this market research, it's seed stage startup without giving too much, cybersecurity industry. Of course, the CEO wants to create a category, but in doing the market research and talking to some current customers and just looking at the landscape, that category, in my opinion, is somewhat well-defined, although a newer category, right? So there's really kind of 3 avenues that I see for him. One is, I think it's too early, and they need to get more of a feedback loop from their customers and prospects to better clarify their POV. I don't believe that they have a POV or a great POV. The other 2 kind of ways I see forward, and this is where I think the questions lead into, is can you define a category within a market, right? So let's say you're targeting enterprise versus SME. Is that enough to create a category, or does that just, dilute the whole thing? And then the other way for it I see is, within time, develop that POV and let that bleed into your product roadmap to truly differentiate yourself. So that's kind of the question.
I mean, we're a little bit absolutist in the sense that if you are entering a category that exists, and your argument for why you should exist is that you do something better or faster or cheaper, that my dial turns to 11 and your dial turns to 10, you are not creating a category.
Yep.
You are sitting in someone else's category and you're creating an argument that you're going to have to win every day. Because you say my dial turns to 11 and tomorrow somebody's going to show up and says mine turns to 12.
Yeah.
But it's certainly possible to, I mean, look, every category somehow nests in another category.
Yeah.
There's giant overarching, categories that, there's automobiles, and under automobiles, there's minivans, and there's, sport utility vehicles. I mean, those are all categories of themselves. And you can create a new category under a nest of another category, as long as it seems distinctive and it puts you aside from everybody else. Everybody can identify you as having created something that feels new and different, and a solution that they didn't think they had before. And different being the operative word. If you're talking about we are different from anything that's come before, then you've really hit it something. You're talking about we are better than what's already out there. That's a hard argument to continue with.
That's great, because it's exactly what I'm going to be telling them. I just kind of wanted to cover my bases. It just doesn't make sense, right? Especially just given how early they are and they're just life cycle. I think there's so many other things to pay attention to. I just think a lot of people think it's just like talk to a couple analysts at Gartner, and and I'm like, I don't think that's not the way this is going to work, right? So I appreciate it.
Yeah, great.
Thanks, Pasha. And yeah, minivans are a great example of category design, and often overlooked one, I think. We've got, Kevin, you have a hard stop at the end of the hour, so we've got 4 minutes left. So let's give Pablo a couple minutes, and then Joe will come back to you with a couple minutes we have left. Pablo, I think you're on mute.
Sorry, man. I'm super interested in what Joe's trying to solve for, so I'm happy to concede, and I can ask my stupid question later. Go ahead, man.
Okay.
Very kind, Pablo. I just wanted to bring it back down specific again around Kevin, John, Damp, your favorite OKRs and KPIs for people that might be leading a category design charge. Yeah. Mentions by news media, XYZ. How do you define and make tangible the pull towards the new category?
I'm punting the mic.
I was waiting for that.
I know you were.
It's interesting. Every category is different. So we usually start with simple things like the use of your category name and hashtags, right? The use of the category name by competitors, because they'll start throwing it into blog articles. They'll start buying it on Google AdWords. They'll start going for SEO. And then analysts. Analysts are without a doubt what build categories. And, you can try your best to subscribe to Gartner and influence them and hope you get a quadrant. Odds are you're not. But if you can get them to start using your point of view, then wait for them to name the quadrant and put yourself right in it. So analysts are huge. Sales activity. If you're using a voice to text analysis tool, and there's several out there, look for the use of the words, right? Especially as an internal measure from your sales team. If they're not using the category name or keywords from the POV, then you got some sales coaching to do. Feedback in Slack. You can have the admin set up something in Slack. There's tons of ways you can do it, but you got to get creative because there's no obvious measure.
Thank you. That's fantastic.
All right. Thanks for following up on that question, Joe. Pablo, do you have a quick one we can sneak in with the minute we've got left?
I feel like they're at their hard stop. You guys can leave now. It's cool.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Well, Mike did put everyone's emails in the chat, but again, it's Kevin at categorydesignadvisors.com, and Mike and Dan as well at the same domain. So
And
if you wanna
Dan,
get-
Dan, raise your hand, wave your hand there. So Dan is our newest member
Hey,
of our
guys.
team here.
yeah,
The
great
other
to have you.
thing,
Go ahead, Dan.
I'm sorry, I was just going to mention again, if you go to the website, we have what we call office hours. You can share it with friends. You know, if you're thinking about category design, you just want to talk about it. You basically get a 30-minute window. We do 4 a week, and we're doing it to build our category. There's a good example of some creativity.
Hey, John, if I could mention one tangible thing that we did, it's probably opening the kimono a little bit too much, but we actually renamed the Slack channel of our entire kind of customer support org to category name champions. And that's 5,000 impressions a day on company-wide on the new category. So people are thinking about it. And I think that's really caught on.
That's
Yeah,
an
genius.
interesting idea.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so-
thanks.
All right. Well, thanks everyone. Thank you so much, Kevin, for your time and for all your answers today and all the thoughtfulness you shared. Really appreciate it. And to everyone else who contributed thoughts or insights. I learned a lot as well. I hope you all did too. And if you couldn't be here for all of it, we'll share the recording afterwards as well. But other than that, we'll let you go, Kevin. Thanks everyone again for being here.
Yeah, thanks for coming, everybody.
Thanks, John.
Take
All
care.
right.